Hello, day drinkers. Hello, day drinkers. And I was going to make a joke there about writer drinkers, drink writer. That didn't, I should have thought of I should have put a little bit of effort into that joke before I just jumped right in. Anyway, tonight is for the writers out there. Zoe York is stopping by to talk about the third book in her really accessible and fantastic nonfiction series. The book that we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about the whole series, but the book that's just recently out is Romance Your Goals. And I read Romance Your Brand a few years ago, like either 20 or 2. It's hard to know. And there were some, she puts lots of charts and things that you should like work on and worksheets, which I kind of dig. And one of the worksheets in there in the first book in the series legitimately changed my entire career. So I encourage you, if you haven't gotten these books, to go grab them. You'll thank me for it. So let's let's read the back cover copy. My mom will not be watching this one, as she is not a genre writer, although you never know when she shows up. Anyway, our publishing business is an extension of who we are and what we want in life. In order to find success at genre fiction writing, authors need to figure out which projects will move them towards their ideal career. This book includes decision-making tools you can add to your career management toolbox. Those are the worksheets. Further expansion on the Series 2.0 concept and how progressive career growth can happen without breakout bestseller success. Support for knowing when to take your writing career in a new direction. And that, I mean, we'll get into it. But let's bring Zoe out. Hello, Zoe.
Hello. Hello. I have to move myself into frame. Yep.
So
happy to be back.
If you freeze, if for some reason your video freezes, but I can still hear you, we're just going to pretend like you're not frozen, because the audio is what I use for the podcast and everybody can hear you. And if they're looking at your frozen face, that's okay. Before we get started, everybody out there, for every comment tonight, I am donating $1 to the Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund, and Zoe's going to match it. So,
I am.
You know, make us pay, guys. $1
comment away.
Pardon?
Yes. Comment away.
Comment away and ask questions. There's going to be a part in this where I'm going to ask very specific questions about very specific career people, writers in very specific career spots, in an effort to stump Zoe on advice. So that's where your comments will be appreciated. I'm having a gin and tonic. Are you having a gin and tonic?
I am having a double gin and tonic in my feminist mug glass.
Gin and tonics remind me of weddings in my 20s. You know, when you went through that, whatever summer that was, where all your friends got married, and gin and tonics were what I was drinking. And I take a sip and I'm like right back there. I had to stop drinking them for a while because of that. So Zoe, I have to say, this book and this series, this nonfiction series of yours, it speaks to, I feel like, this space that you hold in sort of the writer sphere, where you're very busy. And in this book, you actually talk about how much content you're creating some years, like millions of words you're creating some years. And then you're like, yeah, I think I should also maybe do this nonfiction thing. You are a person who is constantly giving out advice on Twitter. I feel like you are a person, I've watched you do it in hallways at conferences, where someone will like ask a sort of vague question and you'll be like, oh, well, here's a 5-point plan for you. So can you talk to us about why you decided to do these books and the space you saw that needed to be filled?
So first of all, I share a lot of resources because when I was starting, people shared with me that everything, and my start was very inauspicious. I talk about that in the book. But I had this semi-long range plan, even before I published my first book, to write in a series and then make the first book in the series free. I had that framework from other authors, sharing their experience, their knowledge, their, what had gone well in their career and what hadn't. So, and I first published in 2013. So I spent all of 2011 and 2012 absorbing other authors' information, their successes, their failures, their learning. And then I published, yeah.
So do you feel like, I mean, not to derail your answer because it's a great answer and I want more of it, but like in 2011 and 2012, were you writing and doing this, or were you like, I am going to soak up this information, write, publish, or were you doing it kind of all at the same time?
No, I started writing and then went looking for how to publish what I had written.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
It
good.
was I was not overly strategic. When I say like, "Oh, I got this great plan," I was not.
Is that a strength?
We have to
An
explain.
added bonus tonight, everybody out there drinking with us. Every time Zoe and I mention one of the Clifton Strengths, you have to take a drink. I mean, I thought that was a bit of a gimme. I pushed that one. Sorry.
No, that's good. So, no, so I wrote The Book of My Heart, which was a small town um, Canadian romance. And then I went looking to the internet to find out how to publish it. I had only written the one book. I mean, I had tried writing a whole bunch of other books, but up until that point, I wanted to write a romance novel, singular. And then, because of what I learned, primarily from Romance Divas, which was a forum, like a website-based forum, was, oh, silly, you need a series. So Romance Your Brand, my first book, first nonfiction book, is all about the power of a series to make a genre fiction career. So, like, I want to write romances versus I want to write a romance series and then I want to do it again and write another one. Those two paths are very different. And that was a lesson that I learned from other people, from Deanna Chase, from Kate Pierce, from Minx Malone, from Roxy Rivera, before I ever published, but after I had written a couple of things. And so I revised my first book to be the first in a series. And then I published it, and then I learned a lot. And then it actually because like there's only so much prep you can do before you execute a plan. And I think one of the lessons that I've tried to share in all three books is this is not one and done. You make a plan, you go and do the plan, you learn from having done that plan, and then you do another plan over and over and over again. And that's what genre fiction writing is. I mean, there are very few commercial genre fiction writers who have not reinvented themselves. Reinventing yourself is actually a part of this career.
Yeah.
And so many people feel like laden with guilt and weird, like, did I fail? No. We all do that because there's so much about this market that is fast moving that when you enter it with all of your preconceived ideas, the market is speeding ahead. And by the time you get your feet under you, you're going to have to change things from that initial plan and start over again. So in 2015, I think it was 2015, or maybe early 2016, Romance Divas, this forum that I had gotten so much from, there was an opportunity there to do a workshop or a course. I actually don't remember now because that was a long time ago. It might have been 2015. And so I put together this 4-week-long course on planning a series that was like half of what I learned from other Romance Divas and half of what I had learned from the experience at that point of, I think I had put out 3 or 4 series at that point, maybe 5. And so that was Romance Your Brand. That was the first iteration of it. It was not a book, but a course, a 4-week-long course. And there are a lot of people, Romance Divas, who still, talk to me to this day, who like, they're like, that was such a great course. And I'm like, I'm so glad. I'm never running it ever again.
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry, StreamYard, unless you sign it, it's all very strange. But so I'm sorry. This is a lovely comment from Facebook user. So I'm really sorry that this is how it's going to show up. But I still have my worksheet from that course.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm sorry, Facebook user. We don't know who you are. But that's going to cost us $1. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny reading your first book and reading your third book, and I wonder how much of it is my mindset, but I actually think it's the first book. The tone of it is like, come on, let's do this. Pull on your big boy pants, big girl pants, and let's do this. And the tone of the third book is like, hey guys, we have seen some shit. We have to reassess. We're gonna it soothed my soul reading it. Like, and I mean, post pandemic, I mean, there's not anybody who's not feeling like, oh my God, what do I do? Where do I gather myself? Right. Was that what you were feeling as you were writing it?
So the bulk of the content inside Romance Your Brand was written before the fall of 2016. I think that the fall of 2016 really did shatter a lot of our optimism for so many writers over the last 5 years have really struggled to write and hope for more and elevate their careers, particularly if they had success prior to 2016. So definitely some of that is about like the larger geopolitical stuff that's been going on, but also it's about there's an enthusiasm that happens in your first couple of years of your career that I remember I had lunch once with a big group of writers, and one of the writers in the group was Deb Cook, who has been published for 25 years at least now at this point. And
reinvention, like
yeah,
pivots.
pivot. And she talked about the 7-year mark, that you can sustain that newbie enthusiasm for up to 7 years. But at some point between 5 and 7 years, you burn out. And I'm glad that I knew that, because when I hit my burnout, I heard her voice in my head and I was like, but she's still doing it 25 years on. So there's also like, there's a pace shift that happens at some point. If someone is listening to this and they are, in those early couple of years, like, I'm not saying this to like warn you at all. Cherish this time. There's something real magical about that early, like, just
oh my God,
surge of words and enthusiasm for everything. But also know that when you hit a wall, if you hit a wall and you no longer have enthusiasm for any of it, like, take a knee, grab a gin and tonic, and this time will pass. And then
you're not alone.
Yeah, and you're not alone. We all kind of go through that at some point. Yeah. So that's the tone that you hear. I mean, the first book was actually, the content of it was initially written years before it was published. And then there was a thread on Twitter. I do these threads on Twitter often about publishing. And Rosemary Ray, who's a good friend on Twitter, said, "When are you going to write a nonfiction book?" And I said, "Never." And then I remembered the course, and Activator. I'm high Activator in the Clifton Strengths. And as soon as she said that, ideation, another sip.
Oh God. Look, you're getting into it. I haven't even asked the question yet.
Ideation plus Activator. As soon as she said, when are you going to ever write this? And I said, never. Then I remembered, I've got this. I have these words. Just pull them into Vellum, which is the software I use to format my books. And let's just see how many pages it is. And it was 20,000 words, which is like 100 pages. So I just had to like revise it into book format and then add some graphs and expand a few things. I added the series 2.0, which didn't exist in the course originally. So the bulk of those words were written years before. And then so book 2, Romance Your Plan, that was mostly written out of a workshop that Jackie Lau and I did at RWA Nationals in New York City in 2019. And then Romance Your Goals, obviously, those are all fresh words that were written over the last year.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that, I mean, there's a lot of, it feels like in this book, more than the first book. And again, that could be my point of view reading it, because I was in that, like, just gobble it up. But you talk so much about how self-assessment is a huge part of this, like being aware and reflecting and thinking about what you've done and analyzing the strengths of it and where it fell apart and not taking that personally somehow is a huge part of it. And you have this, you make this point at the beginning, and I might be paraphrasing this wrong because again, like, I was taking what I want.
That's great.
You were like, maybe the publishing industry wasn't what you thought it was. Like, you say that in part of it, like you've thrown a toe in and you're like, I don't know. But the question is also, maybe you aren't the writer that you thought you were. And I
Yeah.
want to talk to you about you're very clear in these two books that you've taken these two very important courses for your career. But talk to us about how you sort of gathered self-awareness. And was that, I mean, talking about strengths, whatever the strength is where you are able to like think a thought and crystallize it and then spit it out, whatever that strength is. I've always been amazed at how you've been able to do that. But has that always been the case?
I don't know what strength that is. It's probably
Context,
communication.
contextual.
Oh, context. Yes. Okay, context. So context is, and I am not a strengths coach at all. I'm just a strengths nerd. But context is the ability to look at something now and tie it back to what's happened in the past, which really does help when I'm like doing that kind of analysis of what is happening now. It is very annoying if someone mentions something and I'm like, ooh, let me tell you about 3 points in the past that relate to this. And they're like, no, we're good. Okay.
That's why all your answers start with like, well, in 2012.
Yes, that's context.
It is.
Okay.
I'm glad we made big drinks.
I know.
So the question was talking about self-assessment and self-awareness, and were you always able to do that, or is that something you learned?
I don't know that I'm always even able to do it now. I think that it is something that one thing, I think it takes time. So when we get the insight into ourselves, it's not always in the moment that we ask ourselves, hey, what insight should I have here? That sometimes there's time. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I asked myself I write under multiple pen names. And I asked myself about my Ainsley Booth pen name. Like, what am I doing? I have 2 series that are popular with readers. And then I was like, but I need a new series. I mean, that's just like, that is my Zoe principle, right? Is you write a series to retain readers. And then when you're ready to level up, you start a new series, because the new series is where you draw in new readers. And I tried that as Ainsley, and I retained the same readers. I did not find any new readers with that 3rd series. And the same with the 4th series. And I was like, okay, I've gone into the weeds here. Like, what's going on? And I sat on that question without any clarity for 2 years. So, if anyone's like, Zoe,
were you still writing? Were you still writing for Ainsley?
Wow. Yeah, finishing a couple of series, when I felt that I was getting no new traction, strengths, woo in strengths parlance is winning over others. And do I love finding new readers. I love making my existing readers happy too. Positivity.
Jesus.
But woo really gets dinged hard if you can't find new people. And one of the things that I share in the book is, in Romance Your Goals, is a graph of different metrics that I track. One of which is increasing newsletter subscribers, because I think that sales can be very misleading. Sales are not an immediate reflection on how we are doing in terms of, is the content that we are creating right for the marketplace? Sales are a reflection of how we are delivering that content to the marketplace, but it is not a reflection of the quality of the content or its appropriateness for the marketplace. Newsletter signups, I think, is a better reflection of whether or not the content is resonating with readers. At least that is for me, because that's how I frame my books. At the end of the book, the most important call to action I have at the end of the book is get on my newsletter. So conversion there is really important to me. And I was watching my Zoe newsletters numbers climb as expected when I pushed the levers. And my Ainsley newsletters were not, the growth was not there for the lever pushing that I was doing. The same thing. When you have multiple pen names, you get an interesting kind of objectivity to the whole situation, because you're the same person and you're doing the same things, and they work better on this product than they do on that product. I mean, that does shine a spotlight on the product, right? As opposed to like internalizing it and being like, oh, I guess I'm just a bad writer. No, 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 no. It's rarely that, right? It's almost always something else. But it took me, and I mean, I don't want to sound too cocky because I don't even know if I'm right, but it took me 2 years to land on this idea that, and I've mentioned this off, off channel to you a couple of times. I'm sorry, that won't translate well for the podcast. So when I started publishing in 2012, 2013, when I published my first book, erotic romance was a thing. And I'm drawing it like a capstone at the top of, like a genre across the board. And I feel like that has dismantled at some point. And that's what Ainsley was trying to write, but it's kind of scattered. Like my different series are
Yeah.
actually in these, like, if erotic romance is a horizontal genre that has fallen apart, all of my series have ended up in different vertical columns. One is like hot romantic suspense. One is hot political romance. One is just like, I guess, kink, like hot BDSM, or a couple of them like drift in that direction, but they're not the same. And even BDSM romance, I think, has kind of faltered. And then I have a rom-com series. And so it's just,
I mean, when you put it together like that, but it is erotic.
Kinda clear.
It's like it's a category that is often listed with another. It's an erotic hockey. It's erotic whatever. Like, I mean, as someone who did the same thing, like, you got to have another kicker in there.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I don't love taking courses, but as you mentioned, there are a couple of courses that really did change how I think about my career. One of which is the Strengths, Write Better Faster with Becca Syme, the Write Better Faster Academy. Another is Sarah Cannon and her HB90 course. And then the third would be Skye Warren's ad course. And one of the things, there's a couple of tools that Skye uses there inside that ads course that really shines a spotlight on just how much money a series earns you. For your marketing efforts, here's your earnings over X period of time. And so using that tool, I looked at my Ainsley stuff, and you remove the series that just don't earn you as much and look at that one series. And I realized for all of my successes, Ainsley, and I have frontless success often, I don't have a series 2.0. And it's because I don't really know. I don't have this tightness about what any one series is.
Yeah.
So now I have 2 years later, I'm like, oh, okay. And so now I'm kind of resetting and writing a new hockey series because I believe at its core, Frisky Beavers is a hockey series. Not that readers would necessarily identify it as that, but that's the thing that in my series 2.0 that I'm tweaking and pushing forward. That's the thing that needs to be fixed. So but it takes time. I'm not always good at it.
One of the other things that I often think about, and you don't say the words in the book, but I feel like you all but say the words in the book, is about failing fast, right? Like there's an element to this where, I mean, you can assess all day long, but if you haven't done it, if there isn't some, you've got to go out there and mess it up and fail at it and keep going till you succeed at it. And that, like, I mean, you and I are kind of like, or you are ahead of me. I am chasing your coattails on TikTok, but like, you think of all these things that are suddenly thrown into our lives as writers as like, oh man, you got to figure this out. And how important do you feel like they are? How adaptable do you feel like you need to be as a writer right now, particularly an indie writer? Like the idea that you've got to try these things. You've got to try something.
Okay. So jumping on something immediately, that's Activator. So we need to
There you go.
And I do have a very strong Activator strength. So I definitely see that as an advantage. I don't know that it's necessary, because the wonderful thing about strengths is that if you work on your top strengths, whatever they are, there is probably a plan to success. So I think that failing fast is one path to get here. But another one is so we have a mutual friend, Brighton Walsh, and she is, I believe, #1 communication drink.
Right, and I hope you're watching.
We need
Drinking.
to People should be commenting.
There are comments. You can't see them. After this answer,
Oh.
I'm going to pause and read you some answers, some
good.
comments. I'm sorry, for those who are just joining us, Zoe, we are donating, each of us is donating $1 a comment to the Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund. So please, please shout out. Also, because of the platform I use, if you're not like a StreamYard regular, you just show up as Facebook user, and I'm so sorry about that. But anyway, but okay, Zoe, I'm sorry, we're in it. I'm reading these.
No, that's okay. So well, I tend to leap on just about any idea and try it out and see if it's for me and see if I can figure out how it works. Someone like Brighton sits back and watches how other people do it and absorbs how they do it. And then if anyone is following Brighton on TikTok, you'll see that like she started TikTok like 2 weeks ago and she's going
the same day.
But in 2 years or in 3 years, if TikTok book talk is still really a popular thing, there will be lots of authors who started at different points or who started at the same time and took a different path, who might end up in the same place. That we often compare our path to other people's path. And that Sarah Cannon talks about this in HB90. She says, if you don't have your own clear goals, then you will like unconsciously start working towards somebody else's goals. And that's not going to, right? And that's not going to actually get you where
I'm very upset right now.
It's a good line.
Louise. Give me a second. Wow. Okay, I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, I really think that, well, I like the idea of fail fast for those with whom it resonates. It is not the only way to get there. You can fail slowly and figure stuff out. And then your series 2.0. So I have written 73 books, and somebody else who has only written 20 books could be on a much more like sure single track in a niche that they are loving because of different strengths that got them to that point. So there's no one track. Like nobody has to write as many books as I do, unless you're like high ideation, activator, maximizer, woo, positivity. Those are
we're not reading for all of those. I feel like I'm a person who wants to fail fast, right? Like I'm either completely stymied. I'm sorry, this is going to get, well, we drank so much already. I'm either completely stymied by self-doubt and worry and fear, or I'm like, let's just get this shit done with. Like and there's very little in between.
I mean, between those two, let's just get this shit done. Sounds a whole lot better.
Yeah, like, way better.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Might be because I'm 40 now. 40, like when you're young, like whatever. Okay, ready? Here's some comments. Remember, please comment. You can say nonsense. We're donating some money to the Ukraine Crisis Relief Fund. You two make me smile. Hi from St. Augustine, Florida. Great interview, ladies. Mom and Aunt Sherry. That's my mom.
Hi, Mom.
She kicked my ass almost literally into Write Better Faster. Do you know who that would be?
No. There's a list of people who that could be.
I had bet it would take you 15 minutes to mention woo.
And it probably I think it took 20. That's cool.
This comment nodding was when you were talking about the breakdown of erotic romance and how it's sort of been filtered and watered down into other things. And I think this is Brighton. I'm here. Oh my gosh. Look at, there's so many now.
Good job, people.
Is that water? Yes, number one, communication, drink. So cool. Major girl crush on Zoe in this book. Zoe. Brighton, I don't think they can see it.
Strategic.
FTM, what does that mean? FTM, FW.
Oh, for the motherfucking win.
Holy shit, guys. Lilith Darville, really weird. There's a lot of conversation. Can you talk about how to configure your strengths as a path to success?
Okay, so no, because I'm not a strengths coach. I will say that I'm a strengths nerd, And I have monthly strengths coaching with Nikki Haverstock, who was one of the Write Better Faster coaches. There's a whole team of them. They have a YouTube channel. They have a Facebook page and a Facebook group, which might only be for people who've taken the course. And Becca Syme has also written books. And so they can talk about how to configure your strengths as a path to success. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it like in a nerdy fangirl kind of way, but I don't know exactly. I will say, I have this, one of the things that I did, and this was when I was doing coaching with Becca Syme. One of the things that I did, so if anyone knows their top strengths, like their top 5 or even top 7, 8, something like that, one of the exercises that I did, and you can do this with a coach, you could even do it with a peer, like just someone else who knows strengths, is I wrote out what each of my strengths does. And then I figured out when that loop breaks. So I will, it's always my woo. Woo. Where are you in your drink, Molly? Mine's like down.
Okay, listen, I am not a novice at day drinking with authors, and I have a backup. I have been refilling my glass.
So I will go through, my ideation has all these ideas. I can't drink and mention them all at the same time. I'm going to stop mentioning strengths. Okay. So my ideation has all of these ideas. My positivity wants to make them really like make people happy. My input sucks, more content for that ideation mill to churn. My woo wants to push that book out to people. My individualization wants to make the characters unique. My activator wants to get going on all of the different projects right now. My maximizer wants to make them really good. And all of those things are fine when they're working in balance together. But when my woo gets too loud and is like, but people might not like how your individualization or your ideation mashed up 7 things and made it weird. And I'm like, and then I sit and I stew on that for a little bit. And then my maximizer kind of gets out of control with trying to like convince me, the rest of my strengths, that we can still do it. Here are 6 plans to do it. And my activator's like, let's do all of them just in case, like backup plan. And that's where things start to like spiral out of control. So if you can figure out the strength that is most basement-y, that's the language, where the spiral starts, then that's the one that you kind of need to redirect, get out of your way, so that the rest of your strengths can loop in a really functional kind of way. That's me. That's how I made my strengths work after like a lot of coaching.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna get out of strength because I'm almost done with my backup drink. One of the things that you talk about in the book is how you tapping into your enthusiasm, and you had mentioned that like 7-year honeymoon period when you're new and like you're like romance is going to save the world. Your romance is going to save the world. I remember those days so well. Talk about, particularly as like you had talked about the 2 years with Ainsley where you had sort of like what am I doing? What am I doing? Can you talk about finding enthusiasm again?
Mm-hmm.
And the importance to like what a key component that is to success of a project?
Yeah. So one saving grace for me is that I have written under 2 pen names since the end of 2014. So I spent a year and a half where I only wrote as Zoe. And then at the end of 2014, when I started writing as Ainsley and came out with that first book, which was a serial first before I released it as a full novel, I noticed something then. Well, I don't know that it was conscious then. I noticed it later on when I looked back and did that context thing, the retroactive context is a strength. Did that retroactive analysis, was that when I have multiple pillars in my writing brand, then when one isn't going well, I can go to the other. But when both are going well, they're both better. That was something that's actually a more recent realization. In that 2 years, one of the other realizations that I had in that 2 years where I was like, what am I doing as Ainsley? Was I realized that the second pen name helps Zoe in a big way.
Oh.
Helps siphon off the weird, that like ideation, individualization mashup that makes my books a
Right.
little bit weird for the market, siphons that off and puts those ideas in a separate box. So this year I started a third pen name and have had so much fun with it, and I'm having a lot of success with it because there's something about that cumulative. Writing is a muscle, and when we hit those, that awful, either be writer's block or like just
Burnout.
barriers, burnout, like emotional burnout or external barriers to our career. Like if you're a trad author and you go out of contract and then you can't sell another book, secretly start a pen name. Like write some smut on the side because it will keep that writing muscle flexible and warmed up for when you have the right idea to pitch to your agent to get back in the game.
Yeah, I 100% second that. Like that is like in my career with Molly Fader and Molly O'Keefe, that's entirely like both careers, indie and trad, both things will kick your teeth in. Like there are moments for both of them, and there are moments when the rewards come and you're like, holy moly, it's better than I ever dreamed. But when your teeth are getting kicked in on one side, being able to do something on the other, and this is the glory of two pen names. It's like diversifying is what, it's KU is kicking your, the payout just dropped so wide, feels great, like it's that is a smart plan. And
I think I said this in book 2. I've definitely said it in workshops that my career, I before I was published, I worked at a university, and I got a new job inside the university. I was promoted out of the union and into a new position that was created for me. And from day 2 on the job, I knew that the position wasn't as advertised. And that was when I started writing romance. So this idea of like when things are tough over here, go over here and write something hot. Certainly I was doing that even before I was aware of it. And then I stumbled into publishing. Like I joined Romance Divas and figured out how to publish, and I published a couple of books. And I talk about this origin story in Romance Your Goals. But I think I also talk about it a little bit in Romance Your Plan too. So I published 3 books by myself. I wrote a Navy SEAL novella for a box set that was organized on Romance Divas. And on April 30th of 2014, we hit the New York Times list, number 6 on the combined list. And
wow,
it
that's
was
hot.
very amazing. And then
like you're not fooling around.
We're not fooling around. We moved 25,000 units in release week. We were number 22 on the USA Today list, and then we lived on the USA Today list for the next 4 weeks. It was quite a good summer. And I was a baby author. Like that was my 4th story that I wrote.
Oh, that's almost not fair
I
to
know.
later Zoe.
I know, right? And then, so that was April 30th. So the book, the box set had come out the week before, and like newsletter signups were up, and people joined. I had like 200 people in my fan group on Facebook the week before, and by the time we hit the New York Times list, I think it was like 500 or 600 people. Like people not only bought that box set, people read that box set and sought out the authors. This was like the magic. I mean, that summer, it was something pretty special. The next day, May 1st, 2014, that position that had never really come to fruition that I had been promoted into was eliminated. And I was given a package. And they said, we recommend you call an employment lawyer. And I had 2 options. I had like a lump sum of money, or they could like pay me out, like continue paying my salary for 10 months. And the first question, but if I took the salary replacement, then I would lose it the second I found another job. And my first question for the employment lawyer was, does writing count as a new job? And he said, no. And I went, I will take that. Thank you. And it gave me 10 months to figure out this whole writing thing. But I wasn't really, where was I going? What was the question? I've had too much gin. Anyway, I don't remember
What was
now.
the question? Oh, tapping into your enthusiasm.
Right. So
and the Right?
The pen names, the different pen names. I don't know. Oh, I was on such origin story. Something I talk about is my origin story. I don't know. And I say it much better in the book. Anyway,
You do.
oh,
You
the roller
absolutely do.
coaster. The roller
The roller
coaster.
coaster. All
So
right.
there's so
Sorry. I was
as I
just caught
talk
up
about
in it. Keep
I know.
talking. I don't think anybody
So
cares.
so
If anybody
that
remembers what
origin
we were
story,
talking
like number 6 on the New York Times list, it doesn't there's only 5 spots that get higher than that in terms of
Right.
like career peak, right? So there's the thing about number 6 on the New York Times list is there's only one way really to go from there, which is down. And so I talk about this at in the I think it's the introduction of Romance Your Goals. It's also I separated out, it's like in the epigraph at the start of the book, which is once you embrace the roller coaster, because one of the lies that we tell ourselves, or not lies, but one of the myths about publishing that we buy into, the dreams that we have before we're published, is that once we gain some ground, it is ours. Once
Right.
we have, you know, right? Once we have
Yeah.
2,500 people on our mailing list, those are 2,500 fans who will buy every single one of our books. Once we have a deal, once we have
Once
an
you've hit
agent,
5 on the New York Times,
you'll
like
do that again and
surely.
again.
I mean, you'd be fine with 10.
Yeah. I've only hit the New York Times list once more time, and it was number 14. So see, like I'm already falling even when I'm back up again. So it's this roller coaster. And you have to embrace the ups and downs. Embracing the down is the only way you get back to another up. If you cling to the dream that publishing is only an upward trajectory, you're like you are dooming yourself to being bitter about this career that you think that you want, but what you actually don't want. If that's kind of what you're clinging
Right.
to, then that's not what you want. You want just a fantasy.
All right. I had to write that down. Embracing the down is the only way to get to another up.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good podcast right there. Listen, I have 2 more serious questions, and then we're going to try to stump you with some situational questions. The other thing that I sort of loved in the book is you talk about the power of a cohort over
Mhm.
mentors, and you also talk about it sort of on the peripheral of that, which is when you talk about baby steps. And as a
Mm.
person who has often felt like I've been invited into a group and I get into the group and I'm like, Jesus, like, oh my, I'm such a failure. Like people are sharing numbers and they're doing all this stuff. And I'm like, nope, not even close. And not that they're trying to mentor me, but the power of finding people where you're at. And I
Mhm.
feel like that there's a thing that all of us do as humans, right? Where we're like trying to reach up and grab what's ahead of us or whatever. But the power of like finding your crowd right where you're at, everybody looking forward, planning ahead. Like, can you talk about like when you've been in situations where a cohort has changed things for you?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Um, so I think that the best example there would be cross promotion. So you can learn from mentors and you can share your life lessons. Like the people before I was published, the people who I learned the most from, as I mentioned, were people who were already published at that point. Minx Malone had been published, I think, for 3 or 4 years at that point. Kate Pierce had been published for probably almost 10 years at that point. Deanna Chase was a number of years published, Roxy Rivera too. And they were all, I think Roxy Rivera maybe even was a New York Times bestseller at that point. Um, and so I could learn from them, but they were not the people who it would make sense to, like, for example, do a newsletter swap with me. I had 5 people on my newsletter and they
Mhm.
had hundreds or thousands. So when it came time in that Romance Diva space to organize that first box set, the box set that ended up hitting the New York Times list, it was Cora Seaton and myself, 2 authors who we both had the similar number of titles out. We had both been published for roughly the same amount of time. She started publishing a month or 2 before me. And we both wanted the same thing. We had that shared common goal of hitting a list with a box set. And then we invited some heavy hitters, people who were doing really well in military romance at the time: Delilah Devlin, Elle James, Sharon Hamilton, people who had the readers that we wanted to help kind of elevate
Mm.
the set and kind of give it that launch. But we did not ask them to carry the same amount of water that we were carrying. So Cora did all of the coordinating with the cover people, and I did all of the, booking the ads and that sort of thing. And all they had to do was write a story, and then we would do all the heavy lifting around it. So I think that that's an example of working with a colleague. And so, how do you find people like that? Because I think that's often a question in forums, at conferences. Um, Putting yourself out there, at just naming yourself. I see this often in Facebook groups to this day. Someone will say, and I just saw it in, I think it was a TikTok group that I'm in. Somebody the other day said, I'm an introverted fantasy author. How would I ever find my peers? And 4 people in the comments went, I'm an introverted fantasy author too. Hey, buddy. Like, that's,
Yeah, yeah.
and not all of those people are going to become partners in a big project, but they could become at least somebody that you exchange a couple of messages with. The other thing I would say about those, that kind of find your peers and find that cohort, is that those shift over time. That the cohorts that I moved in 2014, because everyone's career paces slightly differently. And that it's important to separate our current cohort of colleagues from our author circle of friends, because our author circle of
Oh,
friends,
wait,
right?
what? Oh, they're all the same.
Well, I mean, have at least 2. Have 2, right? That your author circle of friends, those are the people, because these people are important too. The people who will cheer you on, right? Like,
Mhm.
I can think of a couple of friends they are my colleagues. And I know that they have some buddies who have gone on to do, like, to achieve that outlier success,
Right.
repeat New York Times single title debut releases. And the thing about when you hit that level is, you don't have that many you don't have a big cohort. There are
No, it's
not that
true.
many people. And so the people who are genuinely enthusiastic for you at that point, they are your, like, ride or die crew.
Yeah. From the beginning,
But
people.
from the beginning, those are your from the beginning people. But while they support you and you love them, there becomes this kind of distance. So it's really important that we foster having multiple circles, right?
Mhm.
There's your buddy circle, and you can be cheerleaders for each other, but make sure that as your careers start to go at different paces and into different genres too, like we see this sometimes, people will, start writing romance, but then they'll go into mysteries. If they stay in a romance only space, then they are depriving themselves of,
Right.
all of that, like, current present learning. And so I come from medical education, teaching undergrads and residents. And one of the most important things, if anyone's ever been in a teaching hospital, you will probably remember a resident who came in and the consultant asked them a question, and a resident just, like, had the absolute most current research, right? That is the doctor you want treating you, not the person who that was them 20 years ago and now they're
Right.
just, like,
Right. Right.
really
Right.
good at one thing. And so if you don't regularly, like, reevaluate who your colleague cohort is, and, like, be actively kind of finding a couple of new people to add to that every so often, you're going to find that your information gets stale.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of layers there. There's your cheerleader layer, but then there's also your information layer, and then your, like, cross promotion layer. And you kind of want to, move in some circles that kind of give you access to a
All
mix
of
of
all of
people.
those things. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting. So one of the things that you talk about in the book are the things that you use to measure success that aren't necessarily sales. And can
Mhm.
you talk about the most important metrics? I can't read that.
It depends on the person,
No, wait,
because
wait,
some
wait. No, no, no.
okay, yeah,
Just
no,
let me
sorry.
finish my question. The
Okay.
most important metrics that, if measured and utilized, might lead to sales. Like, in the most sort of broadly, like, without getting too, like, worrying about, but the broadest.
Catalog entry points. How
Okay, so
many first in series do you have?
how many first in series do you have?
Yeah. If you only have one, then the chances of that one leading to riches is lower than if you've got 3.
All right. Can you
Yeah.
give me one more metric? I
Um,
wanted 2.
Newsletters.
Oh, no, I said most important.
The most
Never mind.
important. Most important, I
Well,
think, is
so
having
having more than one way to enter into a series.
not a series, into your catalog. So, if you have only written one series, then I need whoever's listening, I need you to immediately start thinking about a second series that you could write. If it is closely connected to the first series, more the better. If it is something different, that's fine. I talk in the book, this thing I randomly saw on TikTok. This guy talked about like this capital letter T, where we go across the top until we find the place to drill down. So if you've only written one series, you don't know if you're in the right place to drill down. That's the other reason why I think you should write
Right.
multiple series. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so here we are. We're at the place where I am taking questions from the crowd, and I'm also asking you some advice that you would give authors. And it doesn't have to be multi-layered. It's one solid piece of advice for authors in different parts of their career. So the first person I want you to imagine has decided she's got 4 novels, connected, not connected, I don't know.
Yep. Yep.
They were shopped traditionally. They had some interest, but they didn't get bought. And she wants to go indie. What is your number one piece of advice for the person that is in that situation?
What genre?
Is this hard?
No, it's fine. I love it.
You know something? I'm going to say.
Why do I love it? That's good.
Because these are all yours. This is the space you hold. You can't wait. I'm gonna say epic YA fantasy with a big romantic lead. Too weird.
Oh, okay. Okay. So when I think of that, I immediately start trying to figure out who is the comparable, and that makes me think of Grace Draven. So I would, even though Grace writes adult fantasy, but her catalog is not very deep. She has one series that she's writing right now for a trad publisher that it might have 3 or 4 books in it. But like before that, she wrote some standalones and like a duet or duology. So for somebody who is taking fantasy books and launching them indie, editing is probably crucial. Grace's books are exceptionally well written. Covers, so one of the things that I say in the book, at least one of the books, is like, don't spend too much money on covers. Fantasy is the one place where I think that is not true. I do think that a cheap fantasy cover is a deal breaker, and the right fantasy cover can make a book. And if this scenario is right now, then the third prong of my advice would be get on TikTok. Get on TikTok before you release that book. Like crowdsource your ARC readers. And this is true for any standalone book, is you must have the clearest of hooks. If you don't, you can get away with not really knowing the hook of your book if you write a series, because when you discount the first book to free, then that reduces the barrier to entry to try. But if you're writing standalones, and so every book is a paid product, then you must have that clear 1-second hook. And TikTok is the world's greatest place to practice that right now.
Yeah. All right. My second is you have a person who's had one giant amount of success, and not even close. Every book after, not even close. Like not even like it's one giant thing, and then nothing. In terms of, am I starting to echo?
No, might be me.
Okay. What do you say to that?
So I really like the pen name as an option here, particularly if that person is productive or prolific. The pen name can be a way to test your writing in the market without any of those expectations, your own expectations. The other thing I would say is that you have to there's nothing wrong with a roller coaster ride that only has one high peak, and then after that, it's a bunch of little ones. It's a weird design. It's not the most expected design, but you get to still keep riding that ride.
Right.
And that's okay. And then again, context. I like to compare people. I would say look at somebody like Colleen Hoover, right? Like where you are when you are at that low point and you've had this one big high and then it's nothing but little bumps after that. You can think my career is over. And not that Colleen Hoover had like duds, but there was a stretch there. And this is where I get really creepy. But there was a point like 3-4 years ago, maybe it was 2017, I don't know, where Colleen Hoover posted on her Facebook page and said, guys, if you don't stop pirating my books, I'm not going to be able to
Oh,
publish
I remember.
anymore.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right? Huge post. Well, who is living on the New York Times list right now for 40 weeks with 3 titles?
Yeah.
So your past success is no indication of future success, but your past failures are also no indication of future failures. And at any point, you could have another spike equal to or greater than any spikes you've had in the past. Absolutely, at any point, and it will take you by surprise when it happens. That is, in fact, I think the only thing that is a constant in this publishing career is that when it happens again, you will be utterly surprised.
I keep saying to myself as a person, as like a 47-year-old woman who's suddenly on TikTok, and as my daughter said, she is cringing so hard, the front of her face has been sucked into the back of her head. but lightning is never going to strike unless you're there. Like,
Yeah.
you've gotta figure out how to be there in a way that will let lightning strike.
And Robin Carr gave a speech at one of the RWAs where she talked about Virgin River being an overnight success, 30 years in the making.
Yeah.
Right? And that is another bit of context that framed my career, knowing that whatever I'm doing now is the first 10 years of my career.
Right.
And the next 10 years is going to be the next 10 years. And 10 years after that, I will have a Virgin River hit. And I'm very excited about that. I also
it's in your 30-year calendar.
It's in my 30-year calendar. Kate Pierce, I mentioned this definitely in Romance Your Brand. I think I mentioned it again in Romance Your Goals. Kate Pierce, in those early days on Romance Divas, somebody started a thread, and it was like, "What's the best book you've written?" And Kate Pierce said, "I haven't written it yet." And that kind of forward momentum, just keep writing because you're going to write something better. What you write down the road is going to be better than what you're writing now. That is very motivating to me.
Yeah, it's that enthusiasm thing. If your enthusiasm for the next project is greater than your enthusiasm for what you just wrote, which was great, then you're onto something, right? Like that gets felt all the way through. This is a 30-minute podcast. That is to go for an hour. We have no more comments. I'm going to tally up our total and let you guys know how much Zoe and I are going to be donating. Zoe, thank you so much
thank you for having me.
Having a gin and tonic with me and sharing your information, as you are always so generous doing. Everybody out there, stay safe, have a drink, read a book. Good night, guys.